Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be having our weekly compilation of true, scary stories. I hope you enjoy them. So without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. I went to a wedding of my friend Courtney about 2 days ago, and I still can't shake my mind over what happened. For context, I grew up in a very religious household and went to church every Sunday, and Courtney is probably the only person from my old church that I still keep in contact with. The situation started at the reception. Courtney was super excited to see me, and was definitely the only person who felt that way judging from all the stares from the people at my old church. I sat down at my table and started playing something on my phone when some guy sat next to me. He said that the seating chart said that he was supposed to sit at my table, and he introduced himself as the groom's friend Anthony. He was pretty cute, so I spent a lot of time talking to him and we really hit it off. He didn't seem to judge me for being an atheist and seemed genuinely interested in me. When the dance started, they started playing Brown Eyed Girl, and he offered to dance with me. We danced together for most of the night, until he left to go to the bathroom, and a little later I did too. When I came out, I saw that my purse wasn't on the table, which was weird because I swore I left it on there. I was tired, and thought I had just left it in my car, so I went to the parking lot and into my car to look for it, and found it on the center console. I still thought it was weird, because I really thought that I had brought it inside, but at that point it was pretty late at the night, so I didn't think much of it. I danced some more and noticed that Anthony was gone. I asked the groom, who said he had gone home because he wasn't feeling too good. Pretty soon I felt sick too, so I said goodbye to Courtney and went to my car. As I put my keys in the ignition, I looked behind me and saw something weird. It looked like something had ducked down from the trunk. I took my keys out and looked back there, and that was when I saw him. Anthony was crouched down in front of the trunk of my car. I started screaming and ran out with him chasing after me. I went inside and told Courtney, who immediately told her husband, who walked me back to my car where Anthony was nowhere to be seen. Courtney's husband said that he didn't see his car anywhere, so he probably left. I left, and I still feel sick to my stomach thinking about it. He could have easily gone home with me and killed me if I hadn't looked back. Courtney said that she feels terrible that she invited him, and that she had no idea that he would do that. I haven't stepped out of my house since, because I'm worried that if I do, he'll be waiting for me, like he was before. My mom was a single mother of 3 in the early 2000s, and eventually started going on dates when I was about 6. I remember the first time I met him. He made me feel uncomfortable, but my mom shrugged it off because I was a shy kid. She had done her due diligence and Googled his name, coming across a court case, him versus state. It listed him as a convicted felon of murder from back in the early 80s. I don't know how, but he convinced her that it was a mistake. I guess because he had a very generic name, she believed him. We were raised by him, called him Dad, even at one point asking him to adopt us. The adoption never happened, thank God. He was a good dad to us, at first. Things started to get weird when I turned 12. Suddenly, I wasn't allowed to have sleepovers, wasn't allowed to choose my own haircuts, wasn't allowed to watch TV. It escalated to padlocks on the fridge and pantry, having to ask permission to drink water, and never being allowed in the kitchen past 8 p.m. He was a master manipulator, so at the time we all thought it sucked, but was normal punishment, despite us not having done anything to deserve it. I lost my door for weeks, on end, for stupid stuff like forgetting to do the dishes after dinner. Once, when I was 16, I wanted to not go to my brother's soccer game so that I could study, and he went into a blinding rage. I think that was the first time that I was ever truly afraid of him. He was a large man, probably 4 times my weight at the time. I think that was the first time that his mask fully slipped in front of me. He started being weird and creepy towards me once I turned 18. One night as I was sleeping, he came into my room and laid in my bed, saying that he loved me. I was so tired that I didn't even have time to think of how creepy it was until much later. I pushed him out of my room and went back to bed. The next day, while me and my family were gone, he'd stayed behind. He trashed my sister's room for no reason. She was only about 11 at the time and was very upset. He gave her the middle finger, and my mom finally lost it, telling him to pack up his stuff. He brandished a gun, waving it in my face before taking off in his car. We called the cops, and after nearly getting shot, he was arrested. We found out that he was a murderer when his bond was set at $250,000. He tried to lie to my mom again, but it didn't work this time. I looked up the case, and it was way worse than just a murder. He'd beaten someone to death with a metal pipe late at night in a highly populated park. I did not know this man. Not truly. Neither had my mom. He got out on bond. No idea who paid for that. And tried to come back to the house. I was the only one home, and I had no idea my siblings had not locked the door when they left for the day. I was cooking pasta before heading to work when I heard the front door open. I peered my head to the front door, and my blood ran cold as I saw him standing there. He said something to me, but I don't remember what it was. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door, not even bothering to turn off the stove. I pressed up against the bathroom door and called my mom as he banged on the door, asking me why I didn't love him. I was so afraid that I nearly sent myself into an asthma attack. My mom had a family friend come by and pick me up. When they entered the house, he wasn't there anymore. That was the last time I saw him, back in 2017. He'd helped raise me and my siblings for 13 years. He was the closest thing that I ever had to a normal dad, which, given everything, is kinda sad when I think about it too much. I can't help but worry that I'll fall back into the same toxic and manipulative relationship. It's what I knew growing up after all. Maybe that's why I keep people at a distance now. The reason I thought about this recently is because some true crime TikToker actually covered the story on the man he murdered all those years ago, and I stumbled across it. One of his daughters even commented on the post, giving more details about what it was like growing up with him. It was odd, thinking that so many of my peers could put 2 and 2 together if they had seen the TikTok. I know I'm a victim in all of this, but I can't help but feel shame that I was connected to this man and his atrocities. I could end this with a typical "so let's never meet again," but I know we won't, because he died. I didn't go to the funeral. Almost nobody did. From what my mom told me, not even his parents went. The last thing I want to say is please don't give my mom any hate. She was manipulated into believing that he was a good man, and we've made peace with her on this particular subject. A lot of the things that I mentioned happening in my childhood were things that she didn't know about until he was already dead. One more thing, since this is a popular subreddit. If you know who I am based on this story, please keep it to yourself. This all started when I was 20, so about 7 years ago. I've stayed with my parents on and off for years, but recently it became very concerning. Whenever I stay with them, it's overnight. Around 1 to 1:30, I wake up to a small thud. I always figured it was my cat jumping down, or just one of those dream awakenings. As I'm older now and living at home again pursuing a nursing degree, I try to do more than just give money. I help out around the house or do things that'll show my appreciation. This week, I decided I was going to do a clean on the windows, more than a spray down, like scrub the panes and crevices. In like 10 years it's never been done. That's when it happened. As I got to my window, I sprayed it down with Windex to let it set. But that's when I saw it. Handprints all over the glass, much larger than anyone who lives in our home. Like, I wear an XL glove. This would be special order type size of prints. So I set up a cam and a floodlight a few weeks ago, just to try and quell my possible insanity and overthinking. But there's a person who came up the driveway on the camera and stayed at my window at 1:14 a.m. for around 22 minutes from the timestamp, just looking in, and then he just left. I sprayed the windows again. Fresh prints. The police have been contacted, and we've gotten a drive-away alarm. But for your safety, buddy, let's never meet. I'm a 22-year-old woman. I went to the mall to do some shopping for a few clothes. I went to maybe 5 shops, and in the last shop I bought a pair of heels that another woman wanted. She said a few mean things in the shop after I bought them and walked out. I then went to the bathrooms. I didn't realize at the time, but she had seen me walk in. As I was in the cubicle, I heard her walk in and lock the bathroom door. She then knocked on the door and told me that she wanted the shoes. I knew this woman was crazy from the encounter that we had in the store. Not like she was going to like the high heels I had just bought, as she was a bigger woman and I didn't think that she would fit in them. I was very firm in saying no to her and unlocked the door of the cubicle and went to go to wash my hands. That's when things started to get physical. When my back was turned, she grabbed me by the hair and demanded that I let them go. I'm not going to get into what happened, but she ended up stealing the shoes and taking my bag along with ripping all the buttons off of my dress. I straight away went to the security office, but they said because the offense wasn't caught on camera, that there was nothing they could do. I've flown with my 1-year-old solo nearly a dozen times. Usually people are understanding and kind about me having a baby on my lap, and overall he's a happy, easy baby. He's also very cute, so it's not uncommon for strangers to talk to him. Usually I don't mind. The last trip I took, I sat alone in my aisle, with a man sitting by himself directly behind me. My baby was tired and fussing. I knew he was tired, but there's not a lot I could do until after we took off. Right out of the gate, the man behind me was talking to my baby, saying, "Oh, hi, baby. Why sad, baby? Cute, cute baby." I smiled and replied that he was tired and sorry for the fuss. Thank you. After takeoff, I started to get him settled for a nap. The man behind us continued to talk to my baby, putting his hand through the seats to try and grab his feet. Multiple times I asked him nicely to please stop. The baby was tired. You're distracting him. He just needs a nap. Finally, I sat my baby down next to me. He stood on the floor facing the seat next to me so that I could make a bottle. The man behind me stood up and reached over my seat to pick him up. I immediately leaned forward to pick up my baby, saying, "No, thank you. I don't need help. Please, no. No, thank you." The man pushed me back into my seat while mumbling, "Sweet baby, why cry, baby?" I replied very loudly, "No," and quickly picked up my baby. I thought that that was the end of that. I was wrong. I tried to rock my baby to sleep while desperately trying not to lose my cool. As I'm rocking my baby, the man behind me reached through our seats to grab my arm, saying, no rocking, you make him cry." I pulled free from him and yelled, "Do not touch me." Again, I thought that that would be the end. I started rocking the baby for a second time. This time, the man behind me reached both his hands around either side of my seat to hold me in place, saying, "No, no rocking, stop rocking." I am somewhat embarrassed that I completely lost it, clutching my baby to my chest while struggling to get free of him. It hurt. I hit the call light while screaming, "Let me go, do not touch me. Let me go, let me go, let me go." He was still holding me by my arms when the flight attendants came running. I could barely get anything out to the flight attendants. Everyone around us was staring. I was sobbing, and all I could get out was that I could not sit there anymore, and for the love of God, please move me. The man behind me tried to move with me, but I told the flight attendants that I did not know him and he could not come with me. I had a good cry in my new seat, but my baby immediately went to sleep. I was moved to the next to the flight attendants' seats. After calming down, I explained to the flight attendants what had happened. Multiple times, the man that had been behind me got up to try to come back to my new seat, only to be turned around by one of the flight attendants. Towards the end of the flight, one of the flight attendants told me that they'd explained everything to the pilot, and the pilot had called the FBI and local police to escort the man off the flight. I would also be escorted off, as well as everyone around us that watched everything happen. He cheered as he was escorted off. I had to interview with the FBI and nearly missed my next flight. After my trip was done, I had to fly back going through the same airport. It was stressful and emotional to say the least. Even knowing that he was banned from the airline and the airport, I haven't flown since. To the man that tried to grab my baby from me and then wouldn't let go of me, let's never meet again. My fiance and I had just left a sober living house about a month ago. We had been clean for almost a year now and are doing really good. We graduated from the sober living and found a cute little 3-bedroom house. We gave the landlord the money and went over to the house to start loading our stuff inside. There was a little shed out back, so we walked back there and opened it up to put some of the boxes inside. Beneath a piece of plywood, my fiance saw something moving. He thought it was an animal, so he walked over and picked up the piece of plywood. There was a homeless crackhead sleeping under there with his crack pipe and syringe still in hand. We tried to be nice to him and explained that we're moving in, and that he would have to go find somewhere else to sleep. We even told him about the program we had just left, and that it was a really good place, and offered to give him the phone number. The dude narrows his eyes at us angrily and says, "I don't need anything from nobody. I don't trust nobody either, and neither should y'all." The way he said it was absolutely creepy. He strode off down the road and kept glaring back at us. That should have been our clue to not move in, but we had already given the landlord money and felt that we were without any other option at this point. So we moved our things in and tried to get comfortable over the next couple of days. A few days later, my fiance was at work, and this same guy was standing in the road just staring at my house like a maniac. It was just me and a girlfriend home alone, so I was terrified. I called my fiance and told him what was going on, but by the time he was getting ready to leave work, dude had already vanished. I don't know what he was planning on doing, and I swear I'm not one to judge people. I'm a recovering addict myself, and I've been homeless more than once. But the whole thing was just really ominous and threatening. About a week later, there was a shooting death about 3 houses down from us. That was it. We packed our stuff and left, and said screw that house. I don't know who was involved in the shooting, but after we packed our stuff and left, a friend of mine was telling me that the guy we found in our shed was also a convicted R-wordist that had just been released from prison, and that's why he was homeless. Needless to say, I don't want to ever meet that guy again, nor will I ever go back to that neighborhood. We moved 2 hours away and are now staying with my mom. I'll start this story by saying that I'm a 32-year-old woman. I am 170 centimeters and have generic back problems, which make it hard for me to lift too heavy things, let alone try to fight. I live in Denmark, in places where it is very normal not to lock your doors, even at night. The biggest thing that ever happened to me was someone mistook my home for a neighbor's, and they bolted out of the house when they realized they had taken the wrong door. This did not happen at my home, but at my childhood home in the middle of nowhere. My childhood home is a house surrounded by wheat fields, and is down a gravel road that has 2 other houses down at it. Childhood home house is the first house down this gravel road. I was house setting the house for my stepfather, because he couldn't take his 2 dogs, a Rottweiler and a roundabout mix, also a big dog, with him on his trip. I was alone with them for around a week. Nothing happened this week, but it was the last night I stayed there that something did. I was woken up by the dogs barking. They always do this when cars drive down the dirt road. It was normal, and I tend to tell them off and go back to sleep. This time, I saw a light coming inside the room that I slept in. That can only happen if you drive into the driveway. It was in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock at night, and that was what got me up quickly. Luckily, I had the driveway gate closed, but I did not like that some random car in the middle of the night was parking in the small patch between the dirt road and the gate. So I did the only thing that I could do at the moment. I let the dogs outside and hoped that would discourage whoever it was to even try anything. They're loud, and they sound worse than they really are. It did make whoever was driving the car move the car and drive away. They drive up to my first neighbor, who I can see up to because the dirt road lies on a very small hill. They didn't drive in as I thought they would do. They came back down to me again and began to drive very slowly past my house again. At this time, I stood outside at the front door with the light on and watched the car. I didn't like how slow it drove past, but the dogs were still freaking out at the gate, so whatever they were thinking about, they reconsidered and drove away faster this time. I have no idea what the car was doing down the dirt road at this time of night. The main road is more than big enough for you to turn up there instead of going down a dirt road. I don't know what would have happened if the dogs hadn't woken me up, and I have them for my protection. The story goes back to 90s. I was 7 or 8 and going home from school. A 5-minute walk in a safe district. But there was something waiting for me on my way home that day. I remember a man with a big hand reaching to me to shake my small one, and there was another man leaning on a car with its doors open. I shook his hand. I remember him not wanting to let go. He started asking me questions about school and teachers. I was answering while trying to liberate my hand. Then my best friend showed up, shouted my name watching us. Then the man stopped smiling, let loose my hand and went to the car looking frustrated. My friend looked scared and serious. I totally forgot about this 2 minutes of my life because I didn't know what tragedy I escaped. Then somehow the memories re-emerged after 20 years, and I understood that it was a kidnapping attempt. In college, 2008 to 2014, I was an avid metal detectorist. I knew of an old military trail and river crossing way back in a secluded portion of the woods that I knew not many others were aware of. I finally decided one winter morning that I was going to go and metal detect it finally. The trail is about a mile or 2 from a city park along the South Concho River in San Angelo, Texas. I parked my truck, got all my gear, which included a serrated knife for digging, and began my trek through the raw woods and brush for the trail. About halfway into the trees, I get into a clearing and find a tent and campsite about 40 yards back from the river, and very isolated. There's cans lying all around it. some clothes, and other stuff that made it evident that someone was using it. I didn't hang around it for long and kept on my way. As I was getting past the tent, this haggard-looking guy comes out of the brush just a few feet from me. I startled him as much as he startled me, and after some innocent chit-chat back and forth, he asked what I was doing in the woods. I told him about the old trail, my metal detecting stuff, and lied that it was a pretty well-known site for hobbyists like me. The latter seemed to get him a bit anxious. He starts asking me if I've messed with his campsite any, and I told him no, except for accidentally stepping on one of the cans. He was mostly concerned if I had looked into the tent itself though, which, truthfully, I hadn't. The guy related that his wife had kicked him out of their apartment a few days ago, and he was just staying in the woods until he got back on his feet. Didn't really add up in my mind, but I didn't ask anything else about it. Finally, I told him that I was going to get on my way, and with a weird look on his face, he suggested that I not go behind his campsite because he had recently used the bathroom back there. Whether there was fresh fertilizer back there or not, there was no way that I was going to be hanging around much longer regardless. I went a little further towards the trail that I wanted to metal detect, but never felt quite comfortable. So I made a quick turn towards the river and headed back to my truck fairly rapidly. Never saw the guy again until about 2 years later. His picture was in the local news for being apprehended by authorities for the murder of his wife. He killed her and then buried her in the exact area of the woods where I encountered him on that day. Apparently, even though I can't recall if it was the very day of the crime or not, he had just completed the matter when we met. This happened in 1996, in my hometown of about 100,000 people. I was 15 years old, from the suburbs, and went to a high school in the city. English is not my first language, so I apologize for any grammatical mistakes. I finished with class, and for some reason, I decided to walk to the main bus station instead of just waiting at the nearest bus stop. I stood at the gate that my bus line, number 15, starts from. Another bus line, number 17, also starts from the same gate. After waiting for around 10 minutes, a man asks me if bus number 17 had taken off yet. I say yes, I'm sorry. You've just missed it. The man, who looked to be around 30 or 40, then introduces himself to me as Mark. He stretches out his hand for me to shake it. I don't want to be impolite, so I do. I introduce myself as Maya. My name is not Maya. It was bizarre to me that a grown man is introducing himself to me at a bus station. I may have been 15, but I knew better. He asks if I just finished school. I say yes. He asks me what school I go to. I lie. He asks if I'm going home. I say no, even though I am. He asks where I'm going. I say to a friend's house. My bus pulls up and I get on it. Strangely, this man, Mark, gets on as well. I know for a fact he'd asked me if number 17 had taken off yet. If he was originally planning on going on number 17, there is absolutely no reason to get on my bus number 15. They don't have a single stop in common. I sit down and he sits himself next to me. He asks me which year of high school I'm in. I lie and say I'm a junior. I was actually a freshman at the time. He says I look too young to be a junior. I say I hear that all the time. He asks me if I have a boyfriend. I say no, he says that I should. I then ask him where he is going. He says he's going home. I ask if he wasn't planning on taking number 17. He says no, and tells me he lives at the very end of the bus line 15. That was odd. I've never seen him on the bus before. He asks me if I'm on my way home as well. I say no, I'm visiting a friend. Looking back, he knew I was lying. I was sure he believed me, and I really thought I had the situation under control. I should have walked up to the bus driver and told him what's going on. I didn't, because I just wasn't scared enough and I didn't want to make a scene out of nothing. There were plenty of people around, and while he was strange, I really thought he's just a harmless, lonely weirdo. We get to my stop. I purposefully miss it and get off at the next one. thinking I'll fool him and then just walk home a bit longer. To my surprise, he gets off as well. I ask him where he's going, and he says he wants to walk me home. Again, I tell him that I'm not going home. I'm visiting a friend. He says that's fine, he'll walk me. I say he really doesn't need to, and in a stern, irritated tone, he tells me to shut up and walk. There is no one on the street. We're the only ones who got off the bus here. I'm alone with this weird man who followed me from the bus station. I can't go home because I don't want him knowing where I live. I start panicking. I don't know what to, so I just freeze and stand there, silent. In an instant, he went from weird but chatty and smiley to telling me to shut up. And I went from feeling in control to knowing I really, really messed up. He puts his hand on my shoulder and tells me that he doesn't have much time, so we should get going. I want to tell him that he clearly does, but I don't want to anger him, so I just nod. He tells me that if I'm good, I don't have to be scared of him. I lie and say I'm not. He asks me if that means I plan on being good. I say yes. He forced me to repeat it in a whole sentence. Yes, I will be good. I begin walking. I don't know where I was going, I just walked. He walked with me with his hand still on my shoulder. I was never religious, but I remember praying that I don't pass out. My heart was beating so fast, and breathing was so difficult. I was sure I'm about to collapse and die. Then, I spotted an older man tending his garden in front of a house. That's the last thing I clearly remember. I have a vague memory of running. I was later told that I was screaming for help while running towards the older man, while Mark ran off. The older man called the police and they contacted my parents. The police couldn't do anything but take my statement. Since my parents both worked and couldn't take me to and from school, they bought me a phone the very same day. This was in the 90s, when mobile phones were a luxury. I wish the story ended here. After the event, I only ever got on the bus at the stop right in front of my school. A few weeks passed and I did so like I did any other day. We locked eyes as soon as I stepped on. He was on the bus with the biggest grin on his face, like he couldn't be more excited to see me. I was so creeped out I immediately got off and ran into the school. I called my mom in tears and she had me find a teacher to walk me to her car when she came to get me. The school was then notified of the situation. After that, he was spotted walking around the school several times, sometimes a few days in a row, but sometimes he wasn't seen for weeks. The police was of no help. They couldn't do anything until he actually hurt me, or showed up on the school property or at my home. I spent the rest of the year waiting in the school until late afternoon, so my mom could pick me up after work. We always took a very long route home. I now know she was making sure we weren't getting followed. My parents then had me switch schools. Thankfully, he was never spotted in my neighborhood, and I'm very sure he never found out my name or got my address. I only ever saw him one more time. I was 21, in my hometown, on summer break from university. I saw him in a grocery store in a whole different part of town. He didn't recognize me, didn't even look at me, but I immediately recognized him. Where I live, there is no convicted criminal list like in the US. Such cases are not reported, and I never found out the man's full name. I have no idea who he is, or what he has done in the past. I don't know what he would have done to me. My belief is that he was mentally challenged, saw me, liked me, and followed me. My mother believes that it had been much more complex, that he was planning something and that he knew exactly where we're going. My dad still doesn't talk about it. I'm just happy he's out of my life. So I recently got a job at Walmart in online grocery. And while I don't talk to customers nearly as much as cashiers or customer service, I do have to answer a lot of questions and direct people to items they can't find. There are plenty of stupid people who don't look before asking me where something is, and people who are just plain rude. But besides this one encounter, I haven't really had a problem with creepy men. At my past jobs, I was used to men making horrible comments about my body and body mods. But I guess at Walmart, there's always someone weirder walking around, so I don't get as many. It started at around noon when I went out on my first pick run of the day. I was in the soda aisle struggling to fit a box pack of beer into my cart when this guy came up and helped me. He was probably in his early to mid-20s. This kind of adds to the creep factor because I only recently turned 18 and haven't switched out my yellow name tag yet. A bigger guy, a bit shorter than me, wearing a corn shirt. I thanked him for helping me and said I liked his shirt. He said it was no problem and complimented my hair. No big deal, right? I pick up my handheld and get back to bagging soda and praying that I don't get sent on exceptions that night. Around 15 minutes later, I'm in the soup aisle, crouched on the floor, bagging 20 cans of Dinty Moore. Not my finest moment. Someone walks up behind me and says, "Excuse me?" I'm already excited to talk to them. Nobody, and I mean nobody, says excuse me when they want my attention. I stand up and turn around to see the same guy. He says he's been looking everywhere, and he can't find the baking soda, and that he knows he probably passed it, but he wants to make sure he's looking in the right area. The baking aisle is just a few over, and what a coincidence. The next thing I need for my run is bread flour. I tell him I'm heading over to the aisle the baking soda is in right now, and I'll show him where it is. He says thank you. I finish scanning in the Dinty Moore, and we head over. It was a Tuesday, and completely dead. Like, I was seeing my coworkers more often than customers. We get to the baking aisle, and I show him the baking soda before getting to picking out the bread flour. I had a lot to pick from in that aisle, so I was there for a good 10 minutes picking different items, and I couldn't help but notice that he put a tiny box of Arm & Hammer into his cart, and was just standing there on his phone, occasionally looking at me. A little strange, but maybe he's texting someone and is feeling a bit awkward that neither of us has left the aisle. Who knows? I finish my pick run, stage the totes onto the cart, and bring it to the back. I go on 2 more runs before my first 15-minute break, and I catch a glimpse of Corn Guy every so often. I figure he's just having a hard time finding stuff because the Walmart I work at is massive, and continue on with my day. I go into the break room to eat the salad I had in the fridge and drink a cherry Pepsi while getting that good gossip from one of the guys from customer service. And life is good. For a second, I thought I saw Corn Guy walk past the door, but I figured it was just an employee wearing the same shirt and didn't think of it again until later. My manager tells me to do 3 more pick runs before I go to the back to start dispensing orders, and I head out on a produce run. Easily one of the worst types, as the produce section is super confusing and always crazy busy. I get to the produce section and start doing my thing when I see Corn Guy standing next to the corn stand. I laugh to myself for a second before realizing that it's 1:30 at this point, and this guy has been at Walmart for at least an hour and a half. There are only 3 things in his cart. I try not to look in his direction so he doesn't try to talk to me and get back to bagging onions and weighing apples. At this point, I'm getting some serious weirdo vibes from this guy. He walks up to me and says hi. I say hi back and ask him if he needs anything. He proceeds to go on the creepiest tirade I've ever heard. I remember almost exactly what he said because I was standing there in absolute horror the entire time while holding a bag of apples. He said, "I just wanted you to know that you don't need to eat salad if you don't want to. You don't need to lose weight. If you're trying to impress that guy you were talking to, you should go for someone who would love you for who you are, not someone who would want to change you like that. You are so beautiful." I stare at this man in shock. For one, I eat salads for lunch because I like salad. It sure ain't a healthy salad either. Those things are loaded with Caesar dressing and bacon bits. Second of all, I have a boyfriend already. It's not Gavin from customer service. And he's also fat and could not care less what I eat. Third of all, I take offense that some random creep thinks that I have been waiting all my life to be validated by him. A man who spends all day at Walmart without even being paid for it. Needless to say, I am horrified, embarrassed because he just said this in front of multiple other customers who are giving us weird looks, and pissed off by the audacity of this weirdo. I can't tell him any of this. I stick with telling him that I think that's inappropriate for him to say. He needs to stay out of employee-only areas like the break room, and if he needs anything else, he can go ahead and talk to customer service. He looks shocked as if this wasn't the nicest way I could have ended the conversation, and I end my pick run early to go talk to a manager. In the back, I tell my manager about Corn Guy, how he's been following me, and how I'm not going back out to pick tonight unless we know for sure that he's gone. She's understanding, and lets me start dispensing early, and sends one of the guys in the back to pick in my place. The rest of the day goes okay, except when my coworker and I go out together to take a huge order to one of the spots in the main parking lot, and Corn Guy is sitting on the bench out front. I prayed that he was just waiting for someone to pick him up, and refused to take out any more orders to the main lot. I managed to put away returns without seeing him, and with minimal trouble. And at 8, I go back to OGP, turn in my handheld and key card, and say goodbye to everyone left. I always park in the main lot right in front of the grocery section, and as I'm walking, it's just starting to get a bit dark. It had been raining on and off the whole day, and it was the perfect balance of summer warmth and cold rain outside. As I'm unlocking my old CRV, I see the Corn Guy approaching me. I'm scared of what he wants from me, but at this point I have my keys out, and the pepper spray on the chain is clearly visible, so I'm hoping he isn't stupid enough to try something. He walks up to me and starts trying to talk. I shut him down, tell him that he has been following me all day. Reminder that he has been at Walmart for a full 8 hours at this point, and I am uncomfortable talking to him. I am off the clock, and if he needs something regarding Walmart, he can go talk to customer service. And if he wants to talk to me personally, I'm not interested, and he needs to leave me alone. He has the nerve to look offended, and then says something that tops his salad rant in terms of stupid stuff to say to a random woman. Okay, since you're gonna be like that, I won't ask you out, ungrateful jerk. I thought you were cool and could maybe understand me, but you're just like every other girl. I'm too morbidly curious. I ask him what that means. I mean, you seem cool. I don't see anyone around here with ears stretched that big, or who can appreciate Corn's artistry. I thought maybe you were on my level, but you're just like every other stupid Midwesterner in this crappy town. At the end of this little rant, he digs in the pocket of his sweatpants and produces the crappiest little switchblade I've seen in my life. This pitiful little thing couldn't skin a hamster. I'm somehow even more offended. First, I've been stalked all day because I have stretched ears and complimented a guy's band shirt. Second, he thinks Korn is some deep-cut metal band that nobody else has ever heard of. Third of all, we do live in Iowa, but we live in one of the largest cities in Iowa, and this Walmart is right in the middle of it. And fourth, he's not only threatening me with a knife for not living up to his manic pixie dream girl fantasy, but thinks I'm going to be scared of that pathetic excuse of a knife. At this point, I'm so sick of this guy that I just get in my car, tell him to go screw himself, slam the door and get out of there. I haven't seen him since, but I work pretty much every day, so it's only a matter of time. So basically, to the creepy guy in a Korn shirt who pulled a knife on me in the Walmart parking lot, I hope we never meet again. I dated this man for about 2.5 years, and he nearly killed me. Very physically abusive, emotionally, all of it. The last time he hurt me was because I told him I was moving, and I was gonna have a roommate. He didn't like that. He strangled me twice and punched me in the face. I escaped and called the cops. He got arrested a few days later. Until then, though, he was coaching me on how I needed to go back to law enforcement and state that I hit myself, and he didn't really strangle me, that I stopped taking my psychiatric medication and was having a psychotic break that night. At the first hearing, I recanted and told the judge all the lies my ex told me to. The judge believed me, and he was set to get released from jail, but he was still under state county hold or something like that. Before he was supposed to get released, I went back to law enforcement after gaining some clarity and told them the truth again, in which another hearing was scheduled. Undoubtedly, my ex was notified of the reason why another hearing was being scheduled. He was a gang member. Obviously, I will not be saying which one. And as previously mentioned, by now I had moved into the new house with my roommate. But before he got arrested, he asked me where I was moving, and I told him which street corner the house was on, very stupidly. Well, my roommate's boyfriend at the time was affiliated as well. We were with some real winners, huh? And he was apparently notified that my house had been marked by the gang that my ex belonged to, and that showed true. One morning at around 6 a.m., my roommate and her boyfriend were sitting in the driveway in her car with the lights off. I was inside the house asleep. A car then pulled up in front of my house, blocking the driveway, preventing my roommate from pulling her car out. We're still unsure whether or not these people initially knew that there were people sitting in my roommate's car. The mystery car sat blocking the driveway for a few minutes before a man got out of the passenger seat and began walking directly up the driveway to my porch. Luckily, my roommate's boyfriend had a gun on him, and once he saw the man walking towards the front door, he got out of my roommate's car and flashed his gun at the man. The man saw it and ran back to the car, which then sped off. Maybe a few weeks later, I had driven to the gas station a few streets over after the sun had gone down. I was getting a vape or something. When I was walking back to my car out of the gas station, a man in the same car that was in front of my house pulled up next to me and started yelling something. I couldn't tell what he was saying before I just yelled back, "Shut up and leave me alone," thinking I was just being randomly catcalled. I got in my car and went to pull out of the gas station, noticing his car was sitting in front of the exit that I was going to take and not moving. So I went out a different exit and turned back onto the street that my house was on. I looked behind me and saw him following me. He waited for me to leave before he pulled out behind me and followed me. I started going down different streets and kept tailing. So eventually I freaked out and sped up real fast and made a quick, impulsive turn that threw him off my track. I didn't go home. Another day I came home from work and saw that the window in our dining room that looks out the backyard, the only window on the first story that doesn't have iron bars guarding it from the inside, had been tampered with from the outside. It had a screen secured to it so that the window may be opened, and the screen had been ripped off. We reattached it and tried to rip it off ourselves, and it was very hard. My roommate's boyfriend was able to, but we weren't strong enough. It would have taken a lot of effort to get that screen off. Last instance, my roommate's boyfriend and his friend had left our house to go on a walk. When they came back, as they were walking back up to my house, they saw two men peeking through the other dining room window, trying to see inside. They noticed my roommate's boyfriend as he started yelling at them, asking what the heck they were doing, and they scurried away. Me and my ex's final hearing happened a few months ago, and I have gotten him locked up until 2036. I think maybe his fellow gangbangers have realized that a man locked up for the next 12 years is not worth risking their freedom for anymore. And I have since been left alone. I work at a big retail store as a self-checkout host. Most of my days are spent walking laps and listening to customers saying things like, "I don't work here," or "Why aren't you on the register?" I understood their frustrations. Usually there would be 2 or 3 of us at the self-checkout, and maybe 2 manned registers open. We got a new guy in. Let's call him Terry. Terry always wore a mask as if it was 2021 and COVID was still COVIDing. I was training him, telling him to stock candy in bags. He would ask questions anyone would ask. If I'm in school, if I have a girlfriend. I lived in a small city/big town that had a good college. Students from all over the country would come and usually wound up with the prisons or retail. I usually asked the same questions. I told him no on both accounts. He then asked if I ever went hunting. We had a lot of woods and a big forest around the town. No, I don't like guns. He said he'd have to take me one day. A few days go by and he's over on my side again. He asks if I have family in town, and if they didn't, do they live close by? I live 3 doors down from my mom. He starts talking about hunting again, how he was out with his buddies and started using pack tactics, where they would box in the prey and finish it off. Weird for deer, seeing as they flee at the first thought of a noise. He's off for a few days because new hires have problems getting hours for the first 3 weeks. I talk to one of my coworkers, and they tell me that he asks a lot about me. The next time I see him, his questions are very telling. How tall would you say you are? How much do you weigh? How well do you know the woods past so-and-so street? I'm a big guy at 6 foot and 300 pounds, and when he brought up hunting again, a creepy thought would send a chill down my spine. Come on, man. You'd like it. Just some good old boys shooting the crap late at night in the middle of the woods. Then the real fun starts right before dawn. They won't know what hit him. The mask hid most of his face, but I could see it rise when he smiled. I don't know why he thought that would be a great way to convince someone, other than feeling like they were about to hunt me. It sounded like I would have been bored as crap before. I must have made a face or something because he turned and walked away quickly. I told a couple of coworkers about it, but that was his last day. I never saw him again, and I hope that I never do. I came back from getting some parts for my car when I find a note on my windshield. This guy has 8 cars just like mine that he is looking to part out. I thought, aw, sweet, cheap parts. I text him, and it turns out he's looking for someone to take some engines out, which on my car is a lot harder to do if you don't have a lift. Very little wiggle room as they go up from the bottom, but he'd trade my labor for the parts. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. It's maybe an hour per car with air tools. He says he has 4 post lift and tools. I roll up to his shop the next day, but it's actually a construction business. But I don't see any signs of construction. No materials, no power tools, nothing of a construction nature. There's 3 giant machine sheds on his property. I'm talking 50 feet wide, 100 feet long. First thing the guy asks me is if I have any tools. Well, no. I didn't plan on it, nor was that discussed. Oh, don't worry, I have tools. Except his tools were a toolkit from a hardware store, and looked like they had been rained on for 30 years. One of the ratchets had hardly any teeth, and was a pain to use. I spent 3 hours getting to these parts, partially due to the tools, but then it gets weirder. He shows me this car, and turns out he had wrecked it. Then another, he wrecked. This one blew the engine because I was stuck in a snowbank. Okay. Then I hear gunshots in the distance and asked if there was a shooting range nearby. He kind of goes on a rant about it's his neighbors, but they always call the cops and blame it on me. I can shoot my guns when I want, where I want. Okay. Then his story changes, and not only does he want me to pull some engines, but put a few engines in cars too. What the heck? I thought you owned a shop. There's maybe $50 worth of parts here. I'm not doing all that. In fact, I'd be donating a bit of my time pulling motors, but I like helping people. Last thing he says to me is let me know if you need anything. 2 hours pass and I get all the parts pulled, and set them on a tailgate of a truck to show him exactly what I took off. Except he has totally vanished. I walk back to the only machine shed with the door open, and it's completely full of stuff. There's literally pallet racking, shelving you'd see at Home Depot, full of stuff. Retail shelving displays for candy and other things from the 80s and 90s. A dozen ice cream freezers like you'd see in a gas station. 20 newer dishwashers. 10 newer front-loading washing machines. I mean literally an indescribable amount of things. I notice near the roll-up door there's a camper. It's apparent to me this dude lives in it. Except there doesn't appear to be any running water or electricity. But he's not in it. It's clear to me that this person is a hoarder to the 10th power. All I can think of is his father must have been loaded, running a construction company, and left him a multi-million-dollar inheritance. It would take a lot of money to fill up over 22,000 square foot of machine shed with random stuff. Because unlike most hoarders who have garbage, newspapers, and other debris, 99% of his stuff had some value. But like I said, I didn't see one bit of construction material. I drive up the entryway and the gate is closed and locked. What the heck? He never told me that he was going anywhere. Luckily, the gate didn't have an actual fence, and I had to drive my car through a field and drainage ditch to get back onto the highway. I'd taken the parts with me and I planned on coming back. But then the more I thought about it, the more creeped out I was. Especially since I was kind of kept there when he left and shut the driveway gate. One night, I, an 18-year-old male, was at the gym around 10 p.m. because I worked all day and my gym stays open all night. I was casually working out as I always have. Out of nowhere, this very short Hispanic guy comes out of nowhere and asks me what I'm doing later. Thinking this is very odd, I decided to ignore him and act like I couldn't hear him because of my headphones. He kept asking me, but eventually left. When I finished my workout, I went into the locker room to get my keys and check myself out in the mirror. As I entered the locker room, the guy was sitting on the bench staring at me, like watching my every move. So I skipped looking myself in the mirror and grabbed my keys to go out to the bathroom real quick. I can see that he starts to follow me as I head to the urinal, so I quickly resort to a stall. When I left the stall, he is still staring from the urinal. I ignore him and start leaving the gym, but he still follows me. Once again, he asks me what I'm doing tonight and what my name is, but this time I couldn't pretend to not hear him, so I just said, "Sorry man, I'm not interested," and quickly got to my car and drove away. A week later, I had work again this day, so I was at the gym around 10 p.m. and everything was normal. I was working out. I saw some friends and then I see the same guy from a week ago staring at me, whilst laying against an empty wall. I try to ignore him, but every machine or workout I do, he starts to follow me. I stayed by some friends so that he would hopefully not come near me. When those friends left, so did he, so I thought I was safe. I get my stuff together and head out around 11:30. At this point, my phone had died. I was a little worried, but then I started to freak out because when I approached my car, there was a rose in my truck's handle on the driver's side. I actually started to run and went back in to get assistance from someone working because I didn't feel like dying that day. After removing it, I sped home as fast as I could. A few days later, I had a normal workout. Didn't see him till I went to my truck. He was parked right next to me, standing in front of his car. When I got in, I could see him watching me the whole time. Now, every time I go late at night, he's waiting for me and asking me weird questions. I talked to the workers about this, and they said that he's not from here and is just trying to be nice. But I can't help but wonder, why doesn't he get the hint when I tell him no all the time? I wake up hours early in the morning to go to the gym now, but when I go late, he's still there watching me every time. What should I do? Another time there was a rose on my windshield and a phone wire wrapped around my handle. I posted a picture. Then, more recently, he added me on Snapchat. I don't know how he knows my name or how he knew what car was mine in the first place. But regardless, it's really freaky. For some context, I'm a 32-year-old female. This happened to me when I was about 25 or 26. I work full-time as a researcher at a university, which is where these encounters took place. I'm not a professor or anything, and because of my age at the time, I could have easily been mistaken for just another student wandering around campus. On some days when the weather was nice, I would prefer to spend my lunch hour strolling around the university grounds outside, or sitting underneath a shady tree on a bench, enjoying the time I was not sitting in a cramped corner of a lab. On one of these days, I was sitting on a bench enjoying the fresh air, and a male student walking by asked if he could sit next to me. I'm a pretty shy and awkward kind of person, so even though I really would have preferred sitting alone, I said sure. He initiated simple conversation, to which I obliged, but being careful not to be too forthcoming. He mentioned he had seen which departmental building I had came and went from, which slightly alarmed me, given I had never seen this person before in my life. But I pushed the thought from my mind. After all, the weather had been decent lately, and I had spent nearly all of my lunch hours for the past week outside. He asked if I was studying within the mentioned department, to which I told him that I was not a student, but I rather worked there. He told me that he was an engineering student, and then followed up, asking me out to coffee sometime. I apologized and told him that I had a boyfriend and would have to decline. We parted ways after that, and I assumed I probably wouldn't see him around again. About a week or two went by, and I was spending another lunch hour outside on campus, sitting on a different bench somewhere else. Seemingly out of nowhere, the same man from before asked if he could sit next to me again. Admittedly, I don't remember what he started talking to me about at first. My mind was reeling, and I was rather uncomfortable having to potentially turn this guy down a second time. Sure enough, he asked me again if we could go out for coffee sometime. I apologized and reminded him that I had a boyfriend and would not be meeting him for coffee. And again, he left after that. I was feeling rather anxious now, but it still hadn't reached a level where I felt that I had to be concerned. A few days later, I had finished work and was leaving the building to walk to where I had parked my car. The university charges a fortune for parking passes, even if you're employed by them. So I had always opted for free street parking about a 10-minute walk away from the campus. My walking route would take me down several quiet residential streets with minimal car traffic. Even pedestrian traffic was super sparse on the busiest of days. It wasn't until I was about halfway to my car, down one of these quiet back streets, that I noticed someone walking directly across the street from me, but keeping a few paces behind. I noticed him from my peripheral vision and didn't want to flat turn around to stare at him. It wasn't uncommon to see someone else by any means. I was just always trying to be aware of my surroundings when walking the streets alone. I had to make a few turns coming up anyways, and the chance that they would be going the same way as me was pretty slim. But he did. He made all the turns I did, still walking on the sidewalk across from me, a few steps behind. I still did not want to look at whoever this was. I didn't want him to know that I was aware of what I thought he was doing. I quickened my pace to a speedy walk. I was approaching the first of two busier streets before I would reach my car. His pace quickened to keep up with me. That was the moment I panicked. The moment I was sure that he was indeed following me. After that, I started a full-out jog to cross the first of the busier streets. He ran to keep up behind me, and was now on the same side of the street that I was. I was now nearly at my car. I had to cross the last busy street and get about 100 meters and I would be there. But it was crossing the street that worried me. I often had to stop and wait a good minute or so before it was clear enough to do so. If this were the case, he would catch up with me. But as if the stars aligned, as soon as I made it running to the busy street, I had a gap to cross. I booked it as fast as I could, finally turning around once I had made it, to look and yell at the man who had been pursuing me. It was him. I could have suspected, but now it was confirmed. It was the engineering student whom I had turned down for coffee. "Stop following me," I yelled at him from across the busy street. "Can I just talk to you?" he yelled back. I didn't even answer him. I mean, the answer should have been obvious from the start. and I was certainly never going to have my time to someone who had just followed and then chased me for about a kilometer. I kept moving quickly to my car, so determined to get the heck out of there that I didn't even care if he saw which car was mine. He had given up following me and never tried to cross the road too, to my relief. I got home and broke down. I mean, worse things had happened to other people, no doubt, and I was not harmed, fortunately, but I was shook. I had some anxieties walking to and from work after that. It wasn't long before a coworker and I would walk most of the distance back to our cars together after work. I even changed where I started parking for a time. A few weeks had passed since the incident, and I had not seen him around campus at all. I had started spending my lunches in the lab instead of outside, but occasionally I would go to the student center to buy lunch instead. This one particular day, the food court in the student center was packed, almost shoulder to shoulder. I was standing in line at a burger stall, and I heard a guy try and get someone's attention through the crowd. I look up and it's him again, waving to me and trying to make his way through the people. I panicked, and even though I'm terribly shy, I started a scene and yelled to him to leave me the heck alone. His face dropped instantly as people stared at us, and he slinked back into the sea of students. My heart was pounding, and I was shaking. I don't even remember if I ended up getting food after that. I went back to work, and from then on was even more focused on my surroundings than I ever was before. It's been 5 or 6 years since then now, and I still work at the university. I am so relieved to say that I never saw him again after the food court, and haven't had any other harrowing accounts on campus. I am still diligent about being aware of my surroundings, especially when I have to walk to and from campus alone. I never asked the guy his name, so I couldn't even report an incident to campus police or anything. All in all, I'm just glad that I never saw him again, and I can only hope that he never did this to any other girl before or after me. Meet Jane. I don't know much about Jane except that she's from a small town, and she moved here with her friends and boyfriend for university. When I first met Jane at the pub, I thought she hated my guts. She always gave me nasty looks, and when my friends tried to approach her friends, she'd be rude to me. Jane is pretty. Like, very, very pretty. Like, every guy in town has a thing for her. But Jane's boyfriend is insane to say the least. They're regulars at the pub, and I've seen them break up around 3 to 4 times. And the waiter working at the pub, a guy in my friend group, says he's noticed them break up a dozen more, but they always come back together. A couple of months back, I had just finished with the gym, and I had just showered when my mom called and asked about this pub and how's the food there. I told her the food's to die for, and she said that she and my stepdad were on their way there. I told them that I would meet them too, because I was dying for some hot wings and a burger. We sat down, and me and my dad just start drinking beer after beer, and in no time, I had downed around 5 half-liter pints of beer. I was getting a little bit tipsy, but I kept pushing through. My dear friend, let's call her Tina, called and asked if I was down for a drink. I told her to come to the pub as I was already there. She's gonna meet my folks, and they planned on leaving soon, so she and I could continue. That's how it happened. My parents left, and Tina and I continued drinking on our own. The pub was closing, so Tina decided to go to the bathroom, and I walked with her inside to see if I could get another pint. We stumble upon Jane. Jane starts talking to Tina, and they realize they know each other. We all sat down to comfort her as she was a crying mess. Her boyfriend and she were done for good, and she revealed that he used to really abuse her, mentally and physically. I felt bad for her, so when she rested on my shoulder, I just let her. The next night, I get a DM from her, and she's apologizing about the trauma dumping. I tell her it's no biggie as we all need to vent sometimes. Albeit, I do that to my therapist, not strangers, but whatever. The therapist is a stranger I pay, I guess. We continue chatting, and she constantly goes between "I can't text you" and then texting me again. Don't text me, and text me first when I don't. Keep in mind, this is like 2 days since that interaction. One drunken night, she texted me to meet her. It was around 2 a.m., and I had my little cousin come over. That whole night we watched movies and had just fallen asleep, so I declined her offer. Also, I feel it a bit weird for me to hang out with her completely sober while she can barely see. I don't know, just weird to me. The next day she sobered up, and I agreed to meet her for a hangout. We hung out for a while and she was fun to hang out with. I did like her and worry about her and her ex. Soon enough, her leech of an ex left town, as he was never really interested in uni, just being close to her. On one of our dates, she revealed to me that she realized that she had feelings for me, and that's when she broke up with her ex, resulting in him physically attacking her. One day we had a date at her place, a little study date. After we finished studying, we relaxed on the couch and ended up making out. I went home and we continued talking about it, even exchanging photos, and then we hooked up. Now, I'm a person who likes alone time, so sometimes I just want to chill at my house and not really be with anyone, and she did not like this idea. She started spamming me with calls, saying how she could come over and we can chill. She'll be silent and I'd be alone. In my opinion, this kind of defeats the idea of being alone, as I'm not really alone in that situation. She threatened me that if I didn't pick up the phone that she would never talk to me again. This is where I snapped and told her that her lukewarm, at best, manipulation tactics would not work on me and to not contact me again. She flipped out and came to my part of town, hanging out and waiting for me to come out. I told her, I begged her 1,000,000 times to not come to my house, but she simply said, "Nah, I'll pass," and came anyway. I literally felt so disrespected because all of a sudden I hold no value in life. When she texted me, "Come out, I'm here," I texted her, "Nah, I'll pass," and stayed home. Now she's following me everywhere I go. It's been months, and I'm dating the girl of my dreams, but that's not stopped her from being in my shadow. She learned my routine, when I go to the gym, when I'm at practice, etc., and she never fails to show up or drive past where I'm at. My stepbrother reviewed the security footage from our house, and we counted her car driving past my house at least 14 times in a day. I still get texts from her on the daily, even though she's blocked. She gets wasted and spams me with messages on WhatsApp, and then she deletes them. My girlfriend is absolutely livid with this chick, and said that she would not leave me the heck alone. I don't fear for my life, but I have warned my friends that if I die, it would not be an accident or a self-unaliving. She's in my shadow. I constantly have to check my 6 to see if she's behind me. This next post is actually an update to our last post. So a lot of stuff happened 2 days ago, and I couldn't update right away as I really needed to shut off as I had a huge exam today. But now, I can finally let myself process it without it causing any distractions. We met again, at my house. 2 days ago, I went to the pub with my friend Stan. He's a new friend of mine as he's a close friend of one of my best friends. My neighbor best friend Jake was in Durban to visit an aunt. And me and Stan went to the pub as his friend and my other best friend Liam was having the closing shift at the pub. So we went and visited him and had a few drinks. She was there, and everyone was giving me these weird stares like I had murdered their whole family. Finally, the shift manager whom I'm close with came to me, and she laughingly told me that Jane got extremely drunk and talked about a man the whole night at the pub while sobbing. She then showed them a picture of me, and according to some other waiters, she was throwing an entire tantrum because she loved me, and she left her boyfriend because of me. Regardless, I brushed it off, and had to fight off the player accusation, because I'm not one. Anyway, Liam finished his shift. We got into my car and we drove to my house where my girlfriend had already arrived. My mom and her were in the kitchen making dinner, and my stepbrother, younger brother, and stepdad were in the living room just talking, so I joined them with my friends. At one point, I was in the kitchen with my mom, girlfriend, and stepbrother, and my mom asked who made the kitchen into a mess this morning, and my stepbrother said someone else, referring to me and my younger brother. We burst out laughing, so I didn't hear the doorbell. My stepdad did, and he went to open the door. Jane was at the door. She had let herself in, and she was standing in the living room yelling after me. We came out of the kitchen, and we were just staring at each other. She begged me to talk to her, and I had just stared at her and told her that we already covered everything, but she continued begging me. My girlfriend pulled me aside and told me to just talk with her. Maybe it'll give her closure and she'll finally leave me alone. I took her to my backyard. She started apologizing for hurting me. She said I'm sorry like 15 times. I told her that she has nothing to apologize for, and that I sadly cannot forgive manipulations that easy, and that she should give up. She started blaming the alcohol on it, and how she was drunk that night. And I told her that she's been drunk every day for 9 months now since she's arrived in this town, and she only knows me for 6 of those 9 months. She tells me how she used to drink herself crazy back then because of me too. Here's where I snapped, and I told her, I just caught her in another one of her lies, and she smirked, gave me this creepy look and said, I love lying to you. The look she gave me sent shivers down my spine. My yard was dark, and her eyes just seemed demonic for a moment. She was continually getting closer to me, and I froze. I couldn't step back. Not that she'd hurt me as if I'm 6'2" with 250 pounds, but a knife would do some damage. But Jane had another idea. She launched herself at me, locking her lips with mine. I pushed her off, yelling for her to stop, yelling no, no, no. I walked inside. I was mad. My girlfriend looked like she was about to beat her up. I looked at my stepdad and begged him to drive her home. They got her out of my house as she was kicking and screaming. But then she refused my stepdad's car ride and decided to walk. In the middle of the night, and whoever lives in South Africa knows how stupid that idea is. Anyway, she got home safe, as I woke up to texts from her on WhatsApp that she had deleted, from a phone number she had me blocked from. So I pray that she's actually done with me this time, because this is just too much to handle. I worked as a flight attendant for a few years when I decided to take an extended sabbatical from college. There were a handful of let's not meet situations that I encountered, but one in particular still makes my skin crawl more than any other. I was born and raised in Texas, but I had moved to New York when I was 21. So when I found out at the beginning of a week-long trip that I'd have a couple of overnights in Austin, I was super excited to go to my home state for a few days. My brother lived just north of the city, and we planned to hang out and go to dinner the night we arrived when he got off of work. And the following days, we were going to meet up with our dad who lived about an hour away. So I get to the hotel downtown. The crew and I check in, and then we each head off to our respective rooms. Short elevator ride and I get to mine, where not even 5 minutes later there's a loud hard knock on the door. It was only around 1 or 2 p.m., and I hadn't called either my dad or brother to let them know that I was in town yet, so they would not know what room. I assumed it was maybe one of my crewmates, so I headed to that door. Before even making it to the door, however, a loud male voice on the other side boomed. "The front desk sent me about the bathroom problem you called in." Before trying to open the door, "Unlock the door and open up, miss. I need in now." I froze in my tracks. I hadn't even been in the bathroom yet, let alone called anything to the front desk. I'm a petite chick, and while I don't take anything from anyone despite my size, I still err on the side of caution. Slowly inching toward the door to look out the peephole, all I could tell was that the man on the other side was at least 6 foot tall, and easily over double my weight. No way in heck was I going to unlock the door. I responded to the guy, telling him that he must have had the wrong room. He continued pounding on the door while constantly turning the handle, telling me no, he needed in and was getting in the room one way or another. I panicked, but thankfully had the sense to grab the phone and call the front desk. The concierge confirmed that they had neither sent anyone up to the room, nor had they received a call about the bathroom. The entire time, this guy was still determined to get into my room, pounding and yelling. Luckily for me, the front desk had dispatched security to my floor. When the security officers step off the elevator a few seconds later, I can hear them in the hall approach and ask the guy who he was, what he was doing, and telling him that he needed to leave the hotel. He immediately gets hostile and aggressive towards them, and the front desk clerk I'm still on the phone with tells me that police have been called and are on their way. In the meantime, I'm trapped in my room, scared to death. Long story short, the cops show up pretty quickly and manage to arrest the guy for trespassing and criminal menacing or something like that. I later found out that the guy was also wanted in connection to a string of break-ins and violent assaults in Austin. He had seen and stalked me from the minute that I entered the hotel lobby. Apparently, I was exactly his type of victim. Nothing else happened after that. But it still rattled the crap out of me for the rest of my stay in that hotel. Back in 2018, I was 17 around that time, living in foster care. The group home was situated on a busy street. Despite living in the city, we had a backyard, basketball court, picnic table, and at the very back some grass. The whole backyard was surrounded by 2-meter-tall chain-link fences. There were houses to the right and left of ours. At the very back of the yard, on the other side of the fence, there was a public walking and biking path that stretched at least 12 kilometers. This path would take you through this huge park along the water, to the beach, etc. It's a very popular area for people to visit. I was a regular cannabis smoker, although I was always very well put together for a teenager. The group home workers agreed to turn a blind eye on me as long as I didn't make it obvious. So on weekend mornings, I'd go for a walk to the park behind the house. I'd roll up on a park bench and smoke. One day, everything changed. It was a weekend morning as usual at 7 a.m. I made my way to my favorite park bench. I'm sitting there with my joint in my hands. It was quite windy and it kept lighting out. Facing the water, about 100 meters of field between the waterfront and I notice a man stomping through the field heading straight for me. He hadn't seemed like he was on a leisurely walk at all. I remember thinking to myself, 1, why is he not using the paved path? 2, why does it seem like he's walking straight towards me? 3, what is he holding? And 4, is anybody else around? Panic ensued. He was holding something chunky in one of his hands. I looked around for someone, noticed an elderly woman walking from the direction of the group home. She was about 20 meters away from me. I sped walk towards the woman. By the time I got to her, the man had made it to the bench I was sitting on. The woman kept walking towards the bench, and I in the opposite direction. For a moment, I looked back to make sure the man wasn't following me, or worse. I see the man lay his brick down on a pile of rocks behind the bench. The woman stopped walking. I'm guessing she had processed something peculiar. Thankfully, the man kept moving straight towards the boulevard and not to be seen in the park. The woman then turns around, and she looks at me with this shocked stare in her eyes. I remember feeling reassured. We both continued on with our days without saying a single word. That same day, at around 9 p.m., people aren't allowed to smoke within 10 meters of an entry to an establishment, and there was only one light in the backyard. It was above the entry to the establishment. So this girl in my group home goes out for a smoke in the backyard. No lights. Like 3 minutes later, she's banging on the door yelling. I let her in. She's freaking out. We're trying to get answers out of her. Then she explains that there was a man. He stood there on the path. She watched and stared, taking pulls of her cigarette. The man then starts walking towards her and starts climbing the fence. That's when I shared my story from that same morning. To be honest, I thought I was being paranoid at first, but when someone tried to hop the fence, I believe it was the same man. The workers on shift that night called the police, and the police started patrolling the path at night. The group home added some garden lights in the back, and I hope that this person never lays hands on anyone. So I have a good story about something that happened to my ex-partner and I back in 2014. So, my partner and I decided that she was going to go on birth control and made an appointment with the OBGYN at our university's student health services. I take her in. She goes to her appointment and I wait in the waiting room. She comes back out and I leave. While in there, I noticed the man at the front desk kept looking at me and darting away when I made eye contact. Fast forward to the next evening. My partner and I are having dinner at about 8 p.m. when her phone rings. She answers, and it's the guy from the front desk at the Student Health Services office. He introduces himself as such. He goes on to tell her that the STD test came back clean. They do this before you go on birth control, which is odd, because they usually put that info online in a secure portal. Then he starts asking about her sexual history and how many partners she's had. Although she was uncomfortable with answering this, she did, thinking that the front desk guy was asking for information from the doctor. Then he asks if the person she was with was her husband, and she said, "No, it's my boyfriend." Then he says something along the lines of, "Well, I think you're beautiful and clean, and I'll treat you better than him. I want you to come over to my apartment." Startled and confused, she said, "Wait, excuse me? That's inappropriate. Please let me talk to the doctor." He responded, "I'm not at the office. It's closed. I'm calling you from my cell phone." She asks, "Well, how did you get my number? I didn't give it to you." He said, "Oh, I know. It was in your file. I thought you were beautiful, so I added it to my phone after you had no STDs. I also saw your address was near mine, so I'd like to come over. Don't worry about your boyfriend. I can take care of him. I can come over now if you'd like." So she hung up the phone immediately and we called the police and filed a report. I spent the night looking at the front door with a baseball bat. The next day, we ended up starting a case with the school because it was student health services. They tried apologizing at first and saying he was new, but we said, "Oh no, this is not ignorance." We called the dean of the health department and told them what happened and that we were going to file a lawsuit. Needless to say, he was immediately fired and expelled from the school. As he was an international student, he also had to leave the country. Because we didn't want to cost our school money, and they acted swiftly, we didn't pursue any further legal actions. But I still can't get over it sometimes. Update 1. A few of you are mentioning litigation. While I'm sure that we could have, it wasn't something that we were interested in. It's our alma mater, and that money would be coming out of resources, scholarships, and opportunities for other students. Once we went to someone, they not only believed us, but acted swiftly and decisively, and that's all we wanted. Update 2. He wasn't deported, but he was on a student visa and expelled, and the university made sure that he was on his way home. very soon. Back in 2013, I was living with my ex at the time who lived near a nice country village, and as I was in between jobs at the time, I picked up a job at a local garden center. It was casual retail work, fairly decent pay, and easygoing enough that I could take coffee breaks frequently and wear basically whatever I liked as long as I wore my work polo shirt. It was walking distance from my ex's house, and full of people of all ages who were the most lovely people I ever met. Most of the regular customers who came to the garden center were usually sweet old people who would visit the cafe because we had free teas and discounted lunches for OAPs if they had a store card. So you often got to know all of them, and some of them we gave nicknames. Most of them sweet, like Pink Hair Lady, who wore a tasseled leather jacket and bright pink hair. Then there was Camper Van Couple, who used to drive a really cool camper van with bright orange flowers painted on it. You get the idea. With Creepy Artist Man, though, he gave most of the young girls weird vibes. He wore a straw hat, had round gold-rimmed glasses, and would wear strange graphic shirts with naked women on them. He always wore ripped jeans where his knees were always hanging out of them, which were always dirty with paint or mud or something. He had this weird half smile that would never leave his face, and a kind of leer that made people feel uncomfortable. He would take off his glasses and clean them constantly, which kind of made you feel like he was trying to get a better look at the girls who worked there, especially the younger ones, 16-plus school leavers usually. Anyway, it was a roasting hot summer's day, and I had gratefully accepted the job of watering the hanging baskets outside, where I could avoid the humid, sweaty heat of the greenhouses. I was wearing black shorts and my red polo, and my tool belt to prune and dead head plants as I went. With the hose in my hand and sunglasses on my face, I was busy but enjoying the solitary job at the quietest part of the garden center. Well, hello there. Out of practically nowhere, he slipped out behind some wooden trellises and looked me up and down, smiling with his weird, too small teeth. His eyes lingered on me for what felt like an uncomfortable few seconds, and I turned off my hose and asked him if he needed anything. He shook his head and kind of shrugged, still smirking at my legs. I'll call him Cag for ease. Me. Okay, sir, have a nice day. Let me know if you need anything. I turned to continue. Cag. I've never seen you here before, you're a new one. Me. Huh? Me? Well, I've been here for 8 months now. Cag. I must have missed the memo that a beauty like you started. You have a nice tan. You look young. Me. Thanks, I'm 23. Anyways, I have to get back to work. Cag. Nice to meet you. I suddenly remember my name badge and get slightly irritated that he now knew my full name. I make a beeline for the smoking area, where the tool shed was, with an excuse to grab some smaller gardening gloves, and by the time I returned to the floor, he had left. As the weeks went by, he would come into the store regularly, usually mid-afternoon, coincidentally, or so I thought, around the time I started my shift. Most of the time I was the only cashier, so I would have to serve him. He would buy the most smallest, pointless things, like floristry wire, or a tiny bag of birdseed. It seemed like he would purposely make a purchase with the intention of interacting with me. He would make comments about my appearance, statements mostly like, "You have your hair different today. Yesterday you had it down. You have new glasses," or "That's a different lip color to yesterday." He would always announce my name loudly and deliberately during every interaction. I felt uncomfortable, but I was 23 and just politely shrugged it off. Around Christmas time, I was decorating the artificial trees, and he cornered me in the forest of them at the back of the store. He jumped out from behind one and made me jump, to which I was kind of angry about him doing, because I dropped a glass ornament and it had smashed. He bent down also and tried to help, grabbing my wrist and telling me not to touch the glass. His grip was scarily tight and forceful, and his hands were clammy and gross. I slipped my hand out of his grip and asked if I could help him with anything. That's when it got weird. He pulled out a leaflet from his back pocket and told me he was an artist and had a Christmas art show happening in the local church hall, and he wanted me to go with him. He told me that he was a painter, and he thought I would like his work. I had never indicated I was interested in art, to him or anyone else for that matter, which is why I thought it was strange. I asked him if he wanted me to pin the leaflet to the local event board, and he reached out and touched my arm and said, "No, the invitation is specifically for you." He pointed his finger and jabbed it into my breast and he said, "You." So I'm standing there in a dark corner obscured from view by artificial Christmas trees, just kind of cornered by this guy who was touching me. I cringed away and said, "I was busy with my boyfriend that day, sorry," and kind of scampered off. I remember feeling really strange after that. The fact he grabbed my wrist and jabbed his finger into my chest that way. I told a few of my colleagues about it, and they all told me they would warn me next time he was in the store, so I could maybe hang out at the storeroom until he was gone. Well, that memo must have missed a few of the temp Christmas staff, because one day I get told by one, "Your friend is asking for you at the tills." It wasn't unusual for my friends to stop by, as it was fairly popular for gifts, etc. So thinking it was maybe my ex's mom or something, I head to the till, and there he is. He's holding a piece of paper. I cringe, but he had seen me now, so I walk over and ask what he needed from me. He passed the paper over and asked me to open it. Folded up was a drawing of me, with exaggerated breasts and cartoon-like eyes watering the hanging baskets in a sexual kind of position. I kind of stood there and said thank you, but I couldn't keep it, as I thought it was inappropriate to take gifts from customers. I handed it back to him, and he kind of looked at me with this angry stare. He turned around and walked out without another word. By this point, I had had enough. I knocked on my manager's door and told him about the whole scenario that just happened, and all the previous interactions I had had with him over the past year. He watched the CCTV, and agreed that it was so strange the way he gave me this gross picture, and told me he would talk to him if he came back. He praised me for my reaction to his advances, and said I was doing the right thing, and he would try and see him off next time. The next day was a Sunday, and I was not due into work. My boss calls me and tells me he just received a call from HQ stating that an anonymous caller had called in to report a staff member inappropriately coming onto a customer. The staff member they had described and named was me. The caller had said that I had been inappropriate towards him at work, offered to have sex with him, had led him on and obviously promiscuous, and that I had been pursuing him for over a year. The jerk even described a fictitious relationship we had had and ranted loudly about how I had been cheating on my boyfriend before hanging up. HQ luckily didn't believe a word, as my manager had already mentioned the guy to one of the higher-ups, but they thought it was wise to let me know about this crazy guy and suggest I report it to the police. The next day, I did just that. The officer I spoke to said that he matched the description of a man, somebody who often harasses young girls in the local area. He was also known to stalk girls in his car and had attempted to abduct a young girl 4 years ago. The police officers assured me they would file the report and talk to him officially, and that he was not allowed in the garden center or anywhere near me again. And if he did, I was to call the police and he would be arrested. Unfortunately, though, it never stopped him sending a ranting letter to my workplace addressed to me saying he would kill himself if I didn't take him back and receive his gift he drew of me. Fortunately, the police saw this as unsolicited contact and he was thankfully arrested. So, creepy artist guy, let's not meet again. This happened to me years ago, but still affects me to this day. I apologize for the length ahead in advance, but I feel like I have to tell the whole story. The summer after I graduated high school, I was still living at home. I was up late one night and was packing for a camping trip with my friends. It was unbelievably hot, and had the window open as I sat and folded clothes. It was around 2 in the morning, and the next thing I knew, there was a hand coming through the gap in the screen of my window. I screamed, and the hand flew back out. I was stunned, but there was a part of me that wondered if it was my younger brother pranking me. I got up and looked out the window, and just saw the figure of a man staring back at me. I ran into my brother's room, and he was there playing video games. We called the police, who came and searched the area. They found nothing, warned me and my parents to lock the windows and doors, and left. We were all still shaken up, and my mom had a feeling that he would come back. It turns out that my mother's intuition was right. She went outside and waited on our back porch. After 20 minutes or so, she saw a man dressed in black slink into our backyard along the tree line. There wasn't a fence on that side, unfortunately. He hid behind a tree for a few seconds, and then ran to another tree and hid there, slowly working his way towards my window. My mother yelled something to him and he took off running. The police came back out and again found no trace of him. I never opened that window again, not even the curtains. My parents installed some motion detecting lights, and that seemed to be the end of that. About 6 months later, my friend and I got an apartment downtown together. We were really excited as this was our first place on our own. The apartment wasn't exactly the best quality, but it was so fun to be living in the city. The downside was that it was street parking only. After a few weeks, my car was broken into. Nothing was taken, but a single rose sat on the passenger seat. It was creepy, but I vowed to be vigilant and safe. I always tried to park close to the entrance near the lights, but often it was difficult to get those spots, and I would often have to park further away on darker streets. Things quickly began escalating at this point. My car was broken into at least once a week. Most of the time, a flower was left, which I always threw on the ground. But once, a pair of man's underwear was left, and even more creepily, once a bag of Tootsie Rolls, as they were my favorite candy. This made me wonder if the person knew me personally, and I started to become suspicious of everyone. There was a laundry in the basement of the apartment, and one day I went down to get a load that finished drying. As I started to fold, I realized that all of my undergarments were gone. Another week, I had a male friend over from school, and his tires got slashed during the visit. By the time the first letter arrived, I had already started making plans to move elsewhere. The letter described a love for me that had been going on for years. He noted things that proved that he had been watching me closely. I was able to arrange for another friend to take over my lease, and I moved in with another friend on the other side of the city. It was a secured building and had an underground parking garage that was only accessible to tenants. I felt much more secure, and the extra money spent was well worth the peace of mind. Things were quiet for a few months, and then my roommate got a boyfriend. Most of us were wary of Ashley's new boyfriend from the beginning. For one, they met on MySpace after he reached out to her. Another reason was that new boyfriend, Matt, was extremely good looking. And while Ashley was a wonderful person, she wasn't the type that you would typically expect someone like him to date. Ashley was thrilled. She had never had a boyfriend and really felt like this was her Prince Charming. I thought that he was weird and creepy from the beginning. Matt was on the quiet side and always seemed to be sporting and uncomfortable. Leery smile. It was difficult to carry on any sort of conversation with him because he would always make it weird with some random facts that were completely unrelated to what we were talking about. I had deleted my MySpace when the initial stalking began, but I created a dummy account to learn more about Matt. It didn't look like he really knew any of his friends in real life. There were only pictures of himself and the rest of the information was vague. My friends and I gently tried to discourage her from seeing Matt. He technically hadn't done anything wrong, but he was just so strange. She would immediately get defensive and would shut the conversation down. Matt started to spend more time at the apartment, and I found myself finding any excuse I could to avoid coming home. One day I came home from work and found Matt on my couch, alone drinking a beer. Ashley had been called into work, and she told him that he could just hang out. I was furious because I didn't want to spend any time with him, so I grabbed a beer and a snack and headed off to my room and shut the door. About 30 minutes or so later, he knocked on my door and suggested that we watch some TV and to get to know each other better because we both loved Ashley. I didn't want to, but decided that maybe I needed to give it a try. He put on a movie and I tried to just focus on the movie because I didn't want to talk. At one point, I glanced over to Matt and he was staring at me with a smile on his face. I snapped a what at him and he just continued smiling and said, "I just can't believe it." "Believe what?" I asked. He said nothing and we went back to watching the movie. He was still smiling. I had no idea what he was talking about, but the interaction had every hair standing up on my body. I excused myself and locked the door to my room. Another month or so went on, and I had managed to avoid being home for much anything beyond sleep and showering. Matt practically lived there, and had even brought a bunch of his friends into Ashley's room. I really didn't want to move again, but I was beginning to look for other options. On their 6-month anniversary, I saw a huge bouquet of flowers on the table and an already open card propped up next to it. I rolled my eyes and was about to leave when I decided to see what the weirdo wrote to her. When I opened the card, my heart started beating through my chest. Without even reading the words he wrote, I was shaking. The handwriting was exactly the same as the one my stalker had sent. I had kept them as evidence and dug them out of my desk for comparison. The handwriting was unique and identical. Matt was the stalker. I called the police first. As they were on the way, I called Ashley and asked her to come over. She was at work, but said she would be there when she could. I was terrified to tell her because I knew that she would be shattered. The police took a statement from me and actually went to Ashley's work to get more information from her, and they ended up breaking the news. Apparently, Ashley called Matt and left a furious message, even though the cops told her not to say anything and he completely disappeared after that. There was no Matt or anyone matching his resemblance at the place that he said he worked. Ashley had never been to his apartment because he said that he had been staying with friends while trying to save money for a trip to Europe. His family lived out of state, and she had never had a friend of his because he said that they had been falling out because he was choosing to spend so much time with Ashley. It was all lies, and in the end, she was dating a stranger. We don't even know if Matt was his real name. The cherry on the top of this whole thing was that we went through Matt's things. He had left everything when he disappeared, and Ashley and I decided to go through everything. There was a duffel bag that was full of gym clothes, but in one of the compartments, there were about 10 pictures of me. All were taken from far away with the exception of one of me sleeping. The sheets were current, so I knew that it had to have been at the current apartment before I started locking my bedroom door. A few pictures dated back to before the incident at my parents' house, which made us think that that was him as well. 2 pairs of my missing underwear were there, and I shudder to think of what he did with the rest. A Starbucks lid with my red lipstick marks. A necklace I hadn't even noticed missing. A few other random sick souvenirs. The police never tracked him down. I decided to accept an opportunity overseas that I had been considering and got the heck out of there. Unfortunately, Ashley and I quickly drifted apart. She had a really hard time accepting that her first love was a complete psycho. I think I had some underlying anger, maybe misplaced, for believing all of his lies and letting him into our lives. I don't know what his endgame was. Would he have tried to hurt me? Or was he simply content with being in my world? I'll never know. Being stalked changes you. Even when I lived across the world, I looked over my shoulder everywhere I went. I still have no social media accounts attached to my real name. I am married with children and know that he moved on to torment some other poor woman. But every time I visit my hometown, I am tense and keep a low profile. Part of me will always worry that Matt will resurface again. I live in a small, sleepy town, mostly populated by elderly people or people looking to raise their kids in a quiet, tight-knit area. The highest form of crime that goes on here is domestic abuse or someone trying to rob the gas stations, which usually fails since the only gas stations in town are neighboring the police department. I've always been a paranoid kid, my mother having taught me to be afraid of the world. Now I have schizoaffective disorder. I hallucinate often, and sometimes it's hard to tell real people from hallucinations. Tonight was a night where I was 100% sure that this man was real. The night began with me and my buddy deciding to hang out around late 8 p.m. We were planning on going to the local grocery store with a combined $25 to get snacks. But by the time we got in the general vicinity, we realized the store had closed 10 minutes ago at 9. So we decided to go to the gas station instead. Second best option, right? We turned, and I noticed a man who seemed to be in his 20s sitting near the courthouse, with his phone and body facing towards us. Please note that me and my buddy are both unconventional looking. My buddy wearing punkish clothing, while I was wearing green harem pants and a button-up. Fashion stars, I know. We both laughed it off and assumed it was just a guy about to post us onto Snapchat about how ridiculous we looked. A common trend among younger people here. So we brushed it off. We walked around the courthouse to avoid the guy in case he was going to try to confront us, and went on our way to the gas station. We ended up walking by the same side of the courtyard that he was on, and I checked to make sure that he was still there. He indeed was. I made a note of it and we went into the gas station. We both have had pictures taken of us before and people laughing at us, so we just assumed it was another case of this. The more I thought about it though, the more unsettled I felt. Alarm bells kept going off in my head, telling me that something about this situation was not safe. We bought snacks and left, walking by the laundromat back in the direction of the courthouse, as we both lived in that direction. I saw a guy in the laundromat that looked eerily similar to one from just 10 minutes before, but I didn't say anything. We kept walking, and right before we walked in front of the large window of the laundromat, I noticed the guy was holding his phone against the glass, right where we were about to walk in front of it. I panicked, grabbed my buddy's arm, and darted off in the opposite direction. I'm not sure what this guy's infatuation was with recording us, but I was done. I speed walked back to the gas station. Meanwhile, my buddy was telling me that it wasn't a big deal and that it was fine. I told the manager of the station, and he recommended we go to the police. I'm not a fan of the police, and my buddy has a fear of them. But we had no weapons, no way of defending ourselves other than our hands, and who knows what this guy had on him. I walked to the police station next door, despite my friend protesting, and convinced him to come with me, because I didn't trust him outside on his own. Besides, the guy was now sitting outside the laundromat for some reason. After a small wait, we got our names taken, birthdays, and 2 officers came and spoke with us. We described the guy, and they mentioned that they had already gotten a call involving the laundromat and were on their way over there anyways. I described the situation and how he had his phone literally against the glass on the window, right as we were walking past it. And they both agreed that it was creepy, and they were glad that we came instead of going home. We sat outside the station to wait so that we could get fresh air. Eventually, they went to check it out, and were given the okay to go home. We went a very out-of-the-way direction, though, just to be safe. I work at a grocery store here in town, and I hope that I never see this guy again. Thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Get a good night's sleep, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.